Welcome to the Smart Driving Cars podcast. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us. This edition is sponsored by the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. For more information, head to motoetf.com. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alain Kornhauser. Hi, Alain.
Hey, good morning, Fred.
Good morning. And joining us are Ken Pyle, managing editor of Viodi View and producer of Viodi TV, who brings a lot of insight to mobility issues and transportation. Thanks for being here, Ken.
Thank you, Fred.
Also with us is Louis Aaron, a Princeton University junior, a student of Alain's. You've taken a break during the pandemic and have spent some time working with The Boring Company. That's the Elon Musk tunnel venture. Thanks for being here, Louis.
Yeah, good to see you again, Fred.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about, and to be clear, you're sharing your own thoughts with us as a student, not really speaking for The Boring Company. Want to put that out there right at the top. The Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority this month offered a first look inside that underground transportation solution, and the Loop, as it is called, will be available when the World of Concrete Convention takes place in June. Louis, tell us what you've been doing and the status of the project right now.
Yeah, so the project actually, I think there's an article that I know mentioned that the World of Concrete is our first convention. And it's kind of just something that goes to show you how little the media knows about the project. Our first convention is tomorrow, or Wednesday actually, with the Mecum auto auction, I think it's called. So we have a smaller convention starting Wednesday, which lucky for us is a bit of a nice warm-up one, but it is the first time we'll be open to the public. And then we have like a little bit of a medium-sized one just after that, and then will come World of Concrete. But yeah, this week is going to be the first real test. What I've been up to has been largely what I was up to back in November and December, except now I've just got a bit more autonomy. And so that's getting all sorts of permits, whether it's for to install, help install superchargers, or to help install, like our station showpieces, or, whatever it might be. There are an incredible amount of permits that you need to do this stuff. It could be, now when we're looking at our new alignment, which will go through the city of Las Vegas, we need to get soil samples throughout that entire alignment. And so, blocking off new parts of road and drilling through them is obviously a process that needs to be permitted as well. And so, working with our drilling team and with the city of Vegas and kind of developing relationships with some of those city employees has been what I've been getting to do recently. One of the more fun things that I'm working on lately is that the way that this is permitted with the county is as an amusement and transportation system, so ATS. And for our ATS permitting, that's basically, it's totally separate from the building part of it. It's just the operations part of it. And so I've been getting to go through that documentation, kind of updating it for our future expansions to the tunnel. And in some cases that's just updating, changing the project name. And then in other cases it's, really updating the language to reflect a different type of operation. So the system that we've built so far has been twin tunnels, and you go one direction one way and then one direction the other way. And some future parts of the system will just be a single tunnel, where you have platoons going, 6 cars going one way, pick up passengers, and then they come back. And so kind of reflecting or updating the documentation to reflect those kinds of updates. It has been something I've been working on recently.
So
go ahead, Alan.
Louis, can you comment on the amusement part of this? I think we all can, or at least most of our listeners and watchers can understand the transportation part of it. What's the amusement part?
Maybe they're going to be filming another Ocean's 11 movie using the tunnels. That's what
again, this is Louis, and he's a student at Princeton. So
so describe that for us, Lou.
So I mean, the amusement part is just kind of a funny. It's one of the things that shows how funny permitting can be. We're permitted the same way that a roller coaster will be permitted in Vegas, but also the same way that a monorail would be permitted. So it's just kind of a funny byproduct of the system. But that said, I mean, like,
Yeah, let me just interrupt you. Not would be, is right, because there is a monorail
right.
in Las Vegas. And so basically, I think that you followed their lead in some sense in doing this, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And kind of what it ends up meaning is that it's the same staff of plan reviewers and inspectors who are going to be figuring out if this project is safe. So when it came down to final ATS inspections and commissioning, we just had a swarm of a ton of inspectors from the county who showed up at our system and just tried to wreak havoc. I mean, it was pretty entertaining. But at the very beginning, you get a little call over the radio that's like explosion in tunnel 2 east, and I'm like, holy, like, what on earth? Like, this is going so poorly. We're 2 minutes in, there's an explosion. And then after that, it was like, oh, and actually the explosion was like an explosion in 4 parts of the tunnel, and like now you have like shooters blocking the exits and all this wild stuff. And it was like, oh, okay, so this is a test. And then we relaxed a bit. But yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, those things are sort of important because you have to stress test it, and you can't just certify for easy conditions. You have to certified for when things might get a little tough, right?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And then one other comment on the amusement part is that I think one of the parts of this system that a lot of the people at the company think is important is how flexible it is and how easy it is to update. So, it's because it's just an asphalt road underground. If you want to change the drive surface and make it smoother somehow, which is something that we've done, that's something you can do. If you want to make the lights go on in a different way, or tunnel lighting be different, that's something you can do. If you want to add in autopilot at a later time, that's something you can do later. If you want to update the stations, like, it's not that hard to change the painting in the stations, and now you have parking spots that are parallel instead of jagged, whatever it is. Compare that with something like the monorail. Like, once it's built, and there's not that much you can do. So, at this point, now that the tunnels are built out, the stations are built out, a lot of what we do over the next few months is going to be perfecting kind of the amusement part. Like, how easy is it to get into the system? How fun of a ride is it? How professional is it? And those sorts of things that you can iron out in such a moldable system.
And initially, describe for us for audience members who may not be familiar, how this will operate. This is within the convention center initially. Describe what this is going to be like. Yeah,
that's right. So for now, it's 0.8 miles in each direction, so 1.6 total miles of tunnel. And there are 3 stations. There's what we now call the South Station, the Central Station, and the West Station. And those take you from the South Hall to the Central Hall and the West Hall of the Convention Center. So it's a very limited operational design domain, as Professor Kornhauser would say. Not that you can even go outside of it if you'd like to. Or your own tunnel. But that's pretty much the extent of the system now. And now it's about our next section will hopefully begin in the next few months. We can start expanding up and down the strip.
That will be interesting. Ken, I know you've been following this for quite some time, since it was first announced, and share some of your thoughts with us about this and questions you might have.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just a couple things that just triggered some thoughts. One is that what you're describing in many ways parallels what is going on in broadband, in the sense that they're abstracting, the hardware from the software, in a sense that you can make the hardware a dumb pipe, if you will, and then you change things in software and add new capabilities. And it seems very similar, where you have this tunnel that is, just a dumb tunnel, but you're adding the intelligence over time, whether that's through autopilot or, whatever. The other thing that I'm kind of curious is, Las Vegas seems to have in place this amusement, the AMT, whatever you called it, this group that understands how to kind of regulate a transit system like that. Do other jurisdictions, are they as advanced as Las Vegas, so they could be prepared for this kind of thing? What's your thoughts on that, Louis?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for example, so what some people don't know about Vegas is that the Strip itself is not actually in the city of Las Vegas. It's in Clark County. And so Clark County is far more prepared than the city of Las Vegas, which is the portion, the top portion of our alignment. It ends at Sahara Avenue is where it becomes city of Las Vegas, or Sahara, I guess. So the city of Las Vegas does not have, as far as I'm aware, an ATS permitting like group. And so what ends up happening in other jurisdictions that are smaller like that is that you have to figure out what other regulatory agency applies. And so, obviously the last thing that you want to happen is to have like a state regulatory agency going on, because state agencies just tend to be bigger and more bureaucratic and slower. But it just depends. There are like certain cases, I believe, I'm not an expert on this, but I believe there are certain cases where the city will let you contract out to a private, basically what amounts like a private permitting group, but that's not the right term for it. But in essence, I mean, it's what's like QAA, which is, I think, Quality Assurance Agency. That's what they use. That's what Clark County uses even to inspect like welding and steel welds, to make sure that they don't have people on staff who are qualified to do that. So you have to submit, here's the company that we're going to use. These guys are qualified with the county, and they're going to come inspect all of our welding. And then they send a document to the county saying, this weld is good. And I think there's a similar process for ATS systems as well.
So I want to add to the disclaimers. I'm actually an airport commissioner for San Jose Fly SJC. So my comments, though, are strictly my own, and they don't reflect what the comments of SJC. But that's what drew my initial interest in this, was the idea of creating a connector between one of the local train stations and the airport. And I started looking at the economics of it, and just based on what the numbers were publicly, I doubled the number for the tunnel. I used like $250,000 for a car. And in that scenario, it was just assuming like 3 cars, one going each direction, a spare car. And, did some math, figured, okay, it would take maybe 7% of the passengers per year, like 1 million passengers per year. And it came out to about $1.43 or $1.49 per passenger or something. I said, my gosh, if you charge $3, that's a 50% margin. Maybe there's something here. And you compare it to, in Oakland, they have a connector that connects BART to the airport. That's $6 operational cost, forgetting the capital cost, which was, I think, like 400 million or something. So that's what made me really interested in this. And subsequently, I've been following it. Ontario, I know they have a deal with the Boring Company to do that kind of connector. So I think there seems to be some legs there, but it's just been impressive how quickly this has happened. I mean, it's amazing to me.
The speed with which the tunnel is built is a big part of the picture here, right? That the Boring Company is able to do this. What did it take, a year? Yeah,
just over a year. I want to say it was a year and 3 months, but again, I'm kind of showing my lack of knowledge here. But whatever it is, it was most certainly under 2 years from the day that they from shovels. What's the right word? When shovels were in the ground until we are operational. And I think that's kind of something that's left out from the media coverage, because obviously this was finished quickly is not an exciting story, right? And so, I mean, it's just, I mean, building an entire transportation system that is underground, and even 1 mile of it, 0.8 miles of it, is just like wild to complete in like a year and a half, or I think it's a year and 3 months. I mean, I don't even know. I've never heard of another system that has been built that quickly. And the next section of it will hopefully be built in 3 months, which is going to be another 0.4 miles.
What's the next section then?
The next section. So I'm trying to remember whether or not this is public information, but the next sections will connect to hotels on the Strip, and
okay.
there's one that's about 0.4 miles away from the convention center that will be the next section.
So one of the things that impressed me was the it seems like they figured out how to get the cost down, and by doing smart things, like instead of having a diesel run boring machine, it was electric, so the operational costs were lower. And then I know in the beginning they were talking about actually taking the dirt, recycling it, and make bricks out of it and selling it. Did that actually happen?
Yeah, so that's that's an interesting part of what's going on. We've built a little machine in the back of our warehouse that does take a big pile of muck and squish it into bricks. And it's not meant to actually, be it's not meant to be like scaled for sale. It's meant more of like a proof of concept at this stage. But I mean, I think, there's definitely something to it, because it's really, really expensive to haul dirt off of land, which might be a little bit surprising, but when you have truck after truck after truck driving through and picking up dirt every day, it really does add up. And then it becomes really, really expensive if the dirt has chemicals in it, or if it was in a remediation location, or if there's some sort of chemical spill in the past. Because then you got to haul it off even further, and you got to burn it and separate out the chemicals. And so if there's a way to safely, create a pile of bricks on site and move them later, that would definitely be a huge plus. At this stage, I don't think we have plans in the direct near future to actually do that. But this company moves really quickly. Who knows where we'll be in 6 months with that.
So the transportation is actually provided by Tesla vehicles, right?
That's right.
And then step us through the passenger experience here. And I guess there's been some conjecture about how much will be charged too. I don't know if you know anything about that yet, but we've seen some figures in the media.
So the vehicles will be Model Ys and Model Xs, but mostly Model Ys have been, we started with Model 3s, and then we brought a few Model Ys into the system. We found that they were just a much better experience getting in and out. I guess one other note on the vehicle is that when you use mass-produced vehicles like Teslas, they're a lot less expensive per seat than when you have a monorail or a train that are produced at such low volumes. So that's one of the nice advantages, and we can throw new cars into the system, take old cars out, and it's not like we have to have a big construction day or take something over to a big rail yard and haul it off. It's just such an easy process. But as for the user experience, I mean, that's something that's constantly changing, and we're still figuring out. I think probably one of the greatest weaknesses of the system right now is people figuring out how to get in and out of the cars, because in my opinion, there's not a very clear way of knowing who's first, quote unquote, in line, right? There's just a station with a bunch of boarding spaces, and there's not a procedure for which car pulls into which space first yet. And so you might end up being someone who's standing there first, and then a few other people who just walked up get into a car first just because the driver drove up to them for some reason. So obviously those are things, I mean, that's one of those things about customizability that I was saying earlier. That can be fixed, like that can't be the reason that the system won't work, right? So, whether it's painting things on the ground with arrows, or, adding, we just added stanchions for the short run, which are those kind of things that you see at the airport that separate out the lines. We'll see what works best. But, basically, I guess I should say overall, what the process is, you walk up to the station, a Tesla pulls up, you get in, and you tell them which station you want to go to. In the future, the goal is to have an app, and that will be, each car is clearly numbered with it, car 34, car 14, whatever, on the windshields. And I think the goal, if I understand correctly, is that you'll open up your phone, say which station you're going to, and kind of like Uber, you'll see, oh, it says car 34 on my phone, there's car 34. You walk up and get in, and they already know where you're going. So I
and how many people are in your party, et cetera.
Right. So
sounds to me like my favorite analogy with an elevator. I mean, you just show up. If Alexa tells you to go to this one, you go where Alexa tells you. I guess they've put Alexa in elevators, although maybe they haven't been used very much over the past year since nobody's going to work in those towers or whatever. But you get in, takes you to where you 14th floor, you get out, you forget about it, right? I mean, isn't that pretty much it?
Is the goal to take out that elevator operator, the safety driver?
Sorry. Yeah, that's the goal. I know, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, that's the goal. I think, it makes sense that the interim would be enabling autopilot. Right now, we're not allowed to use autopilot because of the permits that we have. And once, so once we get autopilot, then finally the next stage will be obviously full autonomy. But that's, full autonomy in the tunnels is really easy. Full autonomy in the stations is, I think, pretty hard actually. So we'll see how that goes. You can't, I don't see a way that autopilot could possibly function without modifications in a station, right? There's no code for show up to a station, park, let people in, and then go where they tell you. That's not even close to being in the code. So there's going to have to be some significant work done between now and then. But it'll be interesting to see how autopilot goes.
There was also
but Louis, in some sense, you live in Phoenix, and you and I have sort of watched over Waymo and Chandler and so on, and in some sense, this is the way Waymo did it up on the streets. They've had safety drivers, attendants on there doing the driving. And we assume, we don't know for facts, they've been improving the software and the system so that, the driver had to do less. And apparently they are now at a point where at least they're able to take some of the drivers out of there and go out and do it. The same thing there. I think that in our discussions of what to do in Trenton and so on to set it up, you set it up first. You set it up with people, of course. Otherwise the people are going to freak out. I guess, I don't know. I'm not that old. That I got in an elevator, with an elevator operator. But you can imagine that Otis, when he was putting together his elevators and doing all the stunts to show that it was safe and so on and so forth, there was an operator there to get, to deal with the anxiety and to make sure the darn thing really worked. And then at some point, it just somehow the elevator operator disappeared, and everybody didn't even notice. And this is the way this has to go if it ends up going there.
Yeah, I think the hard part here is, or not the hard part, but the part that I'm curious about is that we're not Tesla, right? We're the Boring Company.
Yeah.
So we don't actually. We make very, very minor modifications to the car when we purchase a Tesla. It's basically adding an iPad, and so I don't know whose job it's going to be to go into a Tesla vehicle and update the code there. So I'm really curious to see how our relationship with Tesla develops.
Well, in a sense, the question may be for the Boring Company, as the Boring Company, digs the tunnel, builds the darn thing. The question is who operates it and who does that. And it may, in fact, be an operator, a subsidiary, or a division or whatever of the Boring Company that really focuses on those things. And then when they go out and buy these things, to what extent do they really have to buy Teslas? Well, I know that, the current owner and whatever, and so on and so forth, there's a close relationship, but my goodness, they could go out and buy, XYZ vehicle. As you mentioned, this is the beauty of this thing is it's a very inexpensive surface, that you could maybe put a GM vehicle down there. Whoa.
One of the things,
don't say it because you might get yourself in trouble, but I said it.
There was in one of the earlier marketing, the Las Vegas Convention Center Bureau, it's great the way Elon Musk gets other people to market for him, but they actually show, I've got it on my website, they show a vehicle that is, purpose built, that's, for this kind of thing. It's pretty cool. So
yeah, there is a higher capacity vehicle that's been shown in some mock-ups, and work has been done on that kind of thing. But in the short run, I don't believe there are plans in the very short run to necessarily use that because I mean, yeah, if we want to talk about capacity, we certainly can. But I think there are good reasons to stick with lower capacity vehicles.
And is this really truly like a horizontal elevator in the sense that it's connecting the buildings, and so it's adding value to the buildings itself? Do you foresee like there being charges, or is it just going to be kind of like a people mover to get people from one side of the convention to the other?
Yeah, I mean, it is for convention goers. That's exactly what it is, and I believe it'll be free for convention goers because of the way that the LVCVA has decided to operate it. But you know, there are lots of different cost models that you can use, and I don't think I can necessarily say which ones we're going to go with yet. But if you just think like, what are the possibilities? They are that you can have, for example, in this case, the convention center pay for all their rides. So, you know, you count up how many rides took place, and then the company says, oh, it's $5 per ride. And so then the convention center pays you 5 times the number of rides that took place. Or you could do a base operations fee and say, you know, we'll pay you X dollars per month. Or you can do, let's charge the riders. Or you can do, let's charge the riders a reduced fare. And so if they've got the app, you know, they pay $2, but then for each $2 ride, the convention center pays the operator $3. So there are lots of different models you can go with. And one of the most interesting ones to me is we'll pay for anyone to come to our hotel, but we won't pay for their ticket out. There are a lot of different ways you can do this.
That's the Hotel California model.
Yeah. Well, okay. Just to correct you a little bit, Louis, these are pricing models. These aren't costing models. They're costing from the customer side, but really from the operation side, they're pricing models. And if you're going to run a business, you know, you sort of have to look at how much money it costs you, and then how you're going to price it so that somehow you become other than a nonprofit, right? I mean, that's sort of the simple thing here. And and this reminds me that you know, back in the day, a bunch of us had proposed a personal rapid transit system for Las Vegas, which was going to be elevated instead of underground. And my goodness, if we thought we could dig a tunnel for cheap, we would have, of course, suggested it to be underground, but that wasn't the thing. And in fact, you know, it was really gee whiz bang automation. And of course, our pricing model for that thing was to make it free. Okay, make it free to the user. And where was the revenue going to come from? We were going to put slot machines in the vehicles, and the revenue would come back, you know, from people, you know, playing the slots. And so I mean, it was like crazy. I mean, it was really neat. And we ran into the exact problem that you've just mentioned, is that geez, you know, the various casinos really didn't want good transportation because once they got you in there, they want you to stay there until basically you have nothing left. So whatever. And so, of course, they want to pay you to come there, but yeah, going out, you know, you're on your own, sucker. You know, this is a little bit in jest, but it's yeah, I agree with you. Very good, Louis.
That's great. We'll be back with more, but first, this is a good time to remind you about our sponsor, the Smart ETFs, Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. To get more info, head to motoetf.com. On the website, look for a white paper. It's called The Smart Transportation Revolution. You can find it under the Insights and News tab. They have information there to help you make informed decisions about investing. You may know that ETFs can be a smart way to spread risk with investments and focus on a particular category of stocks. The site, once again, is motoetf.com. We are back with more of the Smart Driving Cars podcast with our guests, Ken Pyle and Louis Aaron. Louis, let me ask you this. Is there, passengers would want to know, they want to be on their phones all the time. Is there going to be connectivity? I assume there is, even though it's a tunnel.
Yeah, absolutely. one of the cool things about the tunnel is how few utilities you can see. Almost everything is underneath the drive path. And so there are no pipes going all along the walls and so forth. But there is one little thing that is going all the way through the tunnel, and it's about this diameter, so maybe like a 1-inch diameter conduit that goes along the top, and that's got a leaky coax with LTE, and so that basically just gives you perfect cell coverage throughout the entirety of your ride, and it's perfect. I mean, I know that because I've driven probably 200 miles through that tunnel now, and I've streamed music, and I've gotten phone calls, and it works perfectly. So that's an important part of the ride experience, and it's going to be there for the whole thing.
We suspect you'd be biased, but the experience, can you describe it for us? I mean, from a, say, what can consumers expect? Is it going to be fun, comfortable, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I personally prefer to sit in the front seat. The back seat's a little tight against the wall, but it's pretty awesome. I mean, it's the only system, the only underground system that I'm aware of that's like perfectly lit. Every single inch of the tunnel is like daytime down there. Or if you want it to be like party lighting, you know, you can do full rainbow. We call it Rainbow Road, and you know, you've got 2 strips of rainbow lights on either side. That's super cool too. You know, I'm sure they'll start introducing some way to play the music that you want to listen to in the car. You know, you've got your own personal pod. It's a Tesla. It's comfortable. It's air conditioned. And I think the last thing is, you know, there's a lot of stuff online. I saw some ridiculous tweet that was like, this is, you can't even open your door in the tunnel. This is a celebrity death machine or something like that. And it's like, this is, I mean, it really is an incredibly safe system. If there were to somehow to be a crash, you absolutely can open your doors, and you can walk right past the side of the vehicle. And more importantly, there's no third rail. So there's no like high voltage electric line going through the middle of it. It's just an asphalt road. And you walk right out. And you know, if you think about it, the furthest, we have 3 stations. So each segment's 0.4 miles. So if somehow you crashed in the worst possible place to crash, right in the middle of those 2 stations, the furthest you're going to have to get out is 0.2 miles. And, you know, obviously fire teams can have great access. We've given tons and tons and tons of tours to fire squads and to Metro Police squads. Almost every single firefighter, as far as I'm aware, in the near vicinity has walked through these tunnels, has a good idea of where the standpipes are and all that stuff. So I think it's an incredibly safe system. So even if it gets some bad press for that stuff, it's really misinformed. And I think that's probably one of the best parts that people don't talk about.
Again, I don't want you to comment. I'm just a little personally surprised that all of the other conduits are under the pavement as opposed to more readily accessible for fixing. I mean, you know, one of the things, even though it is a simple pavement, you know, if it needs to be fixed, you'd prefer not to dig it and prefer to almost still be able to manage to operate while it's being fixed, even, you know, that kind of thing. So easy accessibility to all the various infrastructure that you need, even in a tunnel, probably, you know, needs to be there, but I don't know the details, so therefore, and I don't want you to comment on the details. The fact that the communications piece is open and not just one way, is 2-way. And I don't want you to comment on that but I'm sure Boring Company is not stupid that, you know, it's 2-way, and there's enough oversight over what's going on, again, to make sure that just like with everything else, people are going to have to behave in doing this stuff. You know, people can't be cute and all of a sudden, you know, do whatever. Certainly not any of the things that we sort of saw happening, you know, the last weekend and so on in Houston and whatever. So I think one has to be very serious. Plus, there's an operator inside to assist the passengers, certainly in the beginning. But even if one goes out and starts thinking about, you know, into the future, whatever, you know, people end up having to behave. I know that in airports with people movers, maybe in the beginning, some people were whatever, but I guess because there are other people around, people behave. And that's important. So just, at least not from Lewis's point of view, from my point of view, all those things are very important to make this a successful thing for people to get around. Another comment, do you really need air conditioning that deep or something? Or is it cool enough or whatever? Or there are going to be so many people and so many things, it's going to get hot down there. What's going on?
So we have one subsurface station, and in that station, I don't believe I'm not entirely certain, but I know that we're not pumping a ton of cold air into there. So I believe that's like.
But you have circulation. I mean, you have to do circulation and all that. So I mean, which is a non-trivial part of all this stuff. Okay, yes, go ahead.
Circulation actually is achieved just from the cars flowing through the tunnels, and that's what naturally circulates the air for us. But I think the AC is really for being picked up at the stations on the surface. It's going to be 105 degrees here, 110 degrees in the summer. And,
yeah, up there, you really need it, right? But they're enclosed, right? They aren't, or are they out there in the open? I guess I should know, but I don't. Sorry.
The stations?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're outside. They're just basically a parking, like they're like a fancy parking lot in a sense. You drive up, pulls into a parking space, you get in, and you drive back down.
What are you gonna do when it snows in Vegas? And it snowed this year, didn't it? I heard one day that it snowed.
It did snow. It did snow. Well, the drive surface is covered. We have solar panels.
And those parking lots have charging stations too, I assume, for the vehicle.
Some will. It depends. Yeah. Obviously, the spaces where you're parking to pick up passengers don't need chargers because how long are you going to be stopped? Unless you had some sort of NASCAR pit crew that plugged it in, passengers get in and unplug it. But I think most of the charging is planned to take place back at our depot, basically, which is at our warehouse.
And you cycle vehicles in and so on. You know exactly what the charge is. All that's manageable. I mean, it's trivial.
Right. Exactly.
Well, Alan, I don't know if you were inferring that people misbehave in Las Vegas, but I've never heard of such a thing. So.
No, I'm sure they don't. I mean, in my class, we have the Las Vegas rule. What happens in my class stays in my class. Same as Las, and nobody ever misbehaves in my class, right, Lewis? I mean, we're all perfectly good children in there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, tell us what we know about what's next for the Boring Company. Where else might we be seeing them go to work? Because some things have been on the website, and there are reports that they're off the website. So what's on the horizon?
Yeah, that was a fun news story to see come through. The removal of something from the website turned out to be a Washington Post article. But I think, this is probably the part I can say the least about. But I'll say two things. The first is that the news reports, obviously that there's some mayors in Florida who held press conferences, like explicitly stating that they came here and visited, rode the system, they liked it, they wanted something similar, and so we're exploring projects all over the place, and I think the key is just going to be we want a partner who's going to want to work as quickly as we want to work. We don't want to be stuck in super slow negotiations, or we want to get in, make a system in a year and get out, because that's what's awesome. So it's really going to come down to who's going to let us do that, and then we'll go to them and we'll provide that. But yeah, that's about as much I can think I can say.
Lewis, that's sort of the same concept that we had during the summit and so on with respect to doing mobility systems for the Trentons of this world. The important thing is to create welcoming environments in places that basically welcome the technologies, and and want to do it and work together to make it happen. Certainly there are challenges, certainly there are problems, certainly there are modifications and so on that have to be made with anything, but to go in and sit in the, I sat in the Princeton planning board for 7.5 years, and boy, did I learn how to say no, 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 no every other way. And Ken, you've been in sort of the same thing, you know, in some sense. So in fact, if that's the viewpoint, and you know, if one is developing these things, one has to go somewhere else. One can't afford that time, and find, especially in the beginning, find those that are willing and can actually feel that they can make good use of the technology, and it provides some fundamental benefits to the community. And you know, that's the reason for mobility, is to deliver and improve quality of life to the community. And if one thinks that this isn't going to do this, then you know, then fine.
Yeah. And that's one of the interesting parts about this company, is that it's not actually, at its heart, it's not a mobility company, right? It's a tunneling company. And so mobility is really something that we've gotten into, and as far as I can tell, in order to induce demand, right? It's the same kind of thing with SpaceX, where you create a product and the market's not that big. I mean, from a monetary standpoint, it's a giant market. But how many projects are there to launch things in outer space? You know, you kind of win all the contracts, and then it's like, what do I do with this spaceship? And so Elon's solution was Starlink, where he created a new product that needed more space missions. And he was kind of able to induce his own demand that way. And I think that's what's going on here with the Loop, where it's like, you know, the product is tunneling, but how many tunneling projects are there, and how many people are going to let us, you know, bury their utilities for cheap when we've never built a tunnel before? And so, you know, we've been super lucky with the Vegas project. That it's been an awesome proof of concept where we get paid. And then, you know, more Loop projects obviously will come up again, where we're able to kind of induce that demand. But in the long run, I mean, I think that the technology that's really for sale is this incredible tunnel boring machine that we have, that is so ridiculously fast and ridiculously cheap for what it's doing. So that's I think where you'll see a lot of the projects going forward, is not even in the transportation sector.
So
Well,
can I ask
being
you
in Las Vegas too, I mean, you obviously get to showcase it to people from all over the world. So
yeah, that's
that's
important. And Louis, can I ask you to what extent the geology, where it's applied, changes the you know, accounting or the economics drastically, or is it relatively independent of geology?
Yeah, I'm definitely not an expert on that. What I can say is that there's no project that the company where I've heard our engineers say, oh, because it's in this location, we're not going to do the job. So I think no matter what, it's always economically, I guess, viable or worthwhile for us. I think the more of what I just hear is groaning, where people are like, oh, you know, this is going to be fun. You know, even in Vegas, we've got a lot of caliche soil here, which is not fun to dig through. And so as we do our borings throughout the city and along our future alignment, and you know, you literally hear the guys who did the soil borings earlier in the day walk in with their sample soil in a bag, and the engineers will come together and take a look, and they'll be like, oh no, like that's gonna be, you know, or they'll look at it and be like, yes, like we're going right through that thing. So it just depends. But I think regardless, it's all doable. There's not really a case where we're like, oh, you know, we're not doing California. You know, it's all
maybe because of regulatory reasons. The thing that really gets me though is that it seems like the critics are just comparing it to like a complete transit system, whereas it seems like you guys are looking at use cases where you can prove in something that wouldn't have made sense otherwise. Like the Ontario project, I was just looking at my summary, and they were talking $1 billion to $1.5 billion for light rail versus like 75 million, including the operation system for your 2.8 mile tunnel. And they said, you know what, we don't even need to do this $3 million study. Let's just go for it. And just so to me, that's a huge deal, is that you're not boiling the ocean, you're solving real problems.
Yeah, that's also a great point because, part of what we don't know is how much demand will appear out of nowhere because suddenly new projects are possible, right? I mean, if something costs $3 billion, they're like the vast majority of municipalities are going to say, there's no way in heck that we're going to come up with $3 billion. Let's not even think about this system. But if you're talking about the same system, like you said, for something under 100 million, suddenly you have like 30 more cities who want a system. So it's hard to say right now what that's going to look like. But I mean, it's very possible that there's just like a huge amount of demand out there that will become, a marginal price goes down, the number of projects goes up. So we'll see. I don't know.
Well, the website for the company lists some very interesting advantages to tunnels, including, some that are just obvious: minimal land use, the weatherproof operation, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of advantages here, especially when you can do it at the kind of cost that the Boring Company seems able to do it.
Yeah, I think kind of the question that I have going forward is, you look at this, that there are like all sorts of futuristic mock-ups of what's going on underground, where you have layer upon layer upon layer of these tunnels going in all sorts of directions, and you don't have to stop for anyone. And that's kind of the magical idea behind it, is like it's a highway with an infinite number of layers, theoretically. Excuse me. My question though is like, right now you'll notice that our alignment for Vegas pretty much goes under public roads. So it goes up Las Vegas Boulevard, hangs a right, and then comes back down under Main Street. And that's because right-of-way acquisition is a lot easier if you're doing it under public roads, right? You don't have to get permission from every single property owner, which obviously becomes complicated. And then you get people who are like, yeah, you can go under my property for $40 million. It's just ridiculousness. So, getting to the point where you can kind of just zigzag whatever direction you want to underneath the earth will have to be a change in current, I guess, I don't know if it's zoning policy or land use policy, I guess, which is a part of zoning. There would have to be some change in order to make that viable. So I'm really curious how that's going to go. In the short run, I think you'll see most tunnel systems just going underneath public right of ways.
That's interesting.
I mean,
Let's ask the planning board member, how deep under my house do I own?
Yeah, well, I think, this is a very important point because in fact, there have been people in the past who have wanted to build slurry pipelines from the coal mines in Wyoming or whatever, and to Texas. And of course, the railroads, they would have to cross under railroads. And I do believe that, in fact, people threw in the towel because they just could not get permission from the railroads to pass underneath them. Okay. Otherwise, there probably would be slurry pipelines that would have moved coal instead of 200-car Burlington Northern trains or whatever to move that coal. And so this is not a trivial issue as to the who owns the mineral rights going down and so on. Somehow United Airlines and the airlines have figured out a way to fly over my house here in Princeton, and me not charging them for violating my air rights. The whole business of, at least in some parts of the country, if not many parts of the country, as to who owns what and mineral rights and so on, and access going down is, and I think the people that have done fracking and so on have maybe figured out a way to deal with some of that, and because they go and do who knows all kinds of things with their drilling. But this is a serious issue.
Absolutely. Well, when we were in grade school, they used to ask us after summer vacation to come back and tell everybody what we did on our summer vacation. Louis, you're going to have some tales to tell what you did in your COVID year.
Jesus. Yeah. Oh, no, do I have to give him an A or something? Damn it. I mean, I don't know, Lewis, maybe, whatever. Yeah, it's.
He didn't say no, I noticed.
No, it's been fun. I mean, one of the weird parts about being here is that it's a really young company. And so there are several employees now in the office who've come to the company after I've come. Obviously, the best part is the first 2 weeks when they don't know that I'm not important. And then it wears off. But yeah, it's been a great time. But I'm looking forward to being back on campus in the fall. I'm so excited, and we'll be back into theory and a little bit less practice.
Yeah, well, we certainly want you back, and we certainly better be back on campus because, yeah, while we've made it through the spring, we're in our last 2 teaching days here. It's not been pretty.
Well, terrific. And Ken, where can people go to follow all of your work?
Viodi.com or Viodi.tv. That's Viodi. It's Viodi with eyes.
Wonderful. Thanks to our sponsor, the Smart ETFs, Smart Transportation and Technology ETF. The ticker symbol for the ETF is MOTO, and more information is available at motoetf.com. You can find us at smartdrivingcar.com, also on Anchor FM, Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Google, Spreaker, SoundCloud, wherever you turn for podcasts, and your smart speaker can play us too. You can find my tech reports at techstination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Alain Kornhauser. Thanks for listening or watching, and please continue to stay safe.
Thank you very much, Ken and Lewis.
Thank you.